rodafleming in the Philippines here. I hope you're doing well. Now, those of you who pay attention will remember that I've done a few videos about postmodernism, and I did one recently, quite recently, a few months ago, about Jordan Peterson and his legitimate attack on a career atheist. I want to do a little bit of background here, because I think that understanding what I'm about to discuss will be useful in understanding some elements of the general field of transgenderism and transsexualism in particular. There are two concepts in philosophy and arts, ways of thinking, ways of seeing the world, that are really important, and they're quite distinct. And one is called the Apollonian, and the other is called the Dionysian. Right? Apollonian, Dionysian. The Apollonian is named after the god Apollo. The Dionysian is named after the god Dionysus. Now, let's go back even further in time a little bit. The very earliest religions that we have, the earliest written down one we have is from Sumer, and it's largely complete. The second one is the second most ancient, is from India, the basis of the Hindu religion, the Vedas, which are very, very complete. And in the Sumerian version, the original god is the ocean, and that gives rise to a pair of gods, right? Which are Ki, the earth, and the sky father. So it's the earth mother and the sky father. And they're actually born in having intercourse. You know, he's actually inside her. So they breathe a sigh of love, and this is, you know, a very loving thing. It's a beautiful story, not very well told, but anyway. He breathes out. They breathe a sigh of love, and this sigh of love becomes the air. And because of the ocean, this becomes a bubble, and it pushes them apart. So the sky is always up there, and the earth is always down here. And the point of this is that, look, if you're living in Iraq, which is basically where this started, or any of the areas in the Fertile Crescent where our first cultures really appeared, you're not worried about seeing the sun every day. That's a given. You're going to see the sun every day. What you're worried about is whether you're going to get rain, because without rain, you don't grow anything and you starve. So the sky is where the rain comes from, and the skies, and it's analogous to the semen of the god. So the rain becomes the semen of the god, right, which fertilizes the earth. And I told you this is beautiful stuff. And so you have this idea of absolute symbiosis. You cannot have one without the other. And these cultures which developed this were very much egalitarian, or egalitarian cultures, which were very, maybe not matriarchal, but matrifocal. They were focused on the idea of protecting mothers and children, and the importance of mothers and children to the culture overall. You have to have them. That's what you're there for, is to protect the family. Now, as time went by, the influence changed somewhat. And by the time we look at the Greek era, we're looking at Apollo. I mean, there's Zeus is the sky father, but Apollo becomes the symbol of power. And he's the sun god, right? And this is the one that's giving you the Apollonian way of thinking. It's all very direct, it's upright, it's square, you know? It's micrometer, you measure it. It's logical. You know, everything proceeds from, this is the way I can see things to be, so therefore, you know? It's all very much thought through and logical, constructed, planned, like that, you know? That's Apollonian thinking. Dionysus is the god of the woods. Dionysus is basically Pan. He's the god of love and pleasure and fun, and let's just have a party. That's all about feelings. That's all about living the world through your feelings, right? So he's also the patron of arts, music, and all of these things, whereas Apollo is obviously the patron of war, he's the patron of building, he's the patron of construction, you know, that sort of thing. Dionysus, let's just have a party, right? So when you're looking at the Apollonian and Dionysian ways of thinking, you're looking at two diametrically opposite ways of thinking, but ones which we all have. Now, essentially, the Apollonian thinking is considered to be masculine, not male, because everybody has both. It's masculine, whereas Dionysian thinking is feminine. Now, in historical terms, after the Reformation, the beginning of the Enlightenment, Enlightenment, we had hundreds of years when Apollonian thinking was really very, very much at the centre of the way people thought and made art. You know, we had Newton, we had the beginnings of Newtonian science. Newtonian science is absolutely Apollonian, you know. It's mathematics. You can't get anything much more Apollonian than mathematics, you know. It's all absolutely counted through and calculated, you know. As we come up to the end of the 19th century and into the 20th, however, and this is very obvious in the arts, you'll see that this changes. First you had Romanticism, and then that moved through to the post-Romantics, it moved through to abstraction, but most critically it moved through a person called Marcel Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp created or invented postmodernist art, right? And this is this is a rare inversion. Normally, as Jacob Burckhardt, the great Renaissance historian, or historian of the Renaissance, said, art follows culture. But in fact, in this particular instance, art was the leading edge. Painting particularly was the cutting edge of thought. And what happened was that Duchamp went from the much more, you know, cut and dried observational model that had come before to something much more intuitive, much more mystical, much more felt, touchy-feely, you might like to say. And that really was the way that people like Derrida and Foucault began to think. They began to think very much in terms of feelings and not in terms of logic. Now, I've often said, and again, if you read my stuff you'll know this, that you can't step outside the mythos. Well, what's the mythos? The mythos is all of the stories you've ever heard. It's all the things you believed. It's all the spooks in the night. It's all the films you saw. It's everything. It's all of the subconscious stuff that make up you, right? And you can't escape it. You cannot walk outside it. That's why, you know, I said in that previous video that, you know, I'm a Presbyterian Scot. I could never be anything else. I mean, even if I were to become an atheist or convert to Catholicism, my mythos will always be Presbyterian Scot. Can't change that. I can perhaps add to it, but I can never get rid of that. I can't step outside it. The other side of the mythos is the logos. The logos is logic, right? That is what you learn, what you find out, what you observe. And that you can expand. You can grow that. That's the basis of science. You can take your telescope and say, I see no ships. And you can start to look at the way the planets move and things like that, and you go, what's going on? What does this mean about me? Am I actually standing at the centre of the universe, or am I, oh wait a minute, maybe I'm not. You know, that's not something that we come from Dionysian thinking or from the mythos. It comes from Apollonian thinking and the logos. Now, remember that thing I said about how Apollonian thinking tends to be associated with masculinity and Dionysian thinking tends to be associated with femininity. You remember that a little bit? Well, that's quite important, because what happened after the Reformation and the Enlightenment was that we went through a period where things were extremely masculine, extremely Apollonian. And like I said, in arts you can start to see that breaking down at the beginning of the 20th century, and coincidentally, roughly the same time as women started to be politically emancipated and started to enter the world of men. And what they did was they started to change the way that things were thought by bringing in the Dionysian. And this becomes to a real peak around 1965. It's very, very powerful in the West, and particularly in the United States, but also in Europe. You get this uprising of alternative cultures and a hippie lifestyle, and everybody's smoking pot, you know, and it's all touchy-feely, it's, you know, get my third eye going and I can see that stuff, you know. That's all extremely Dionysian. And as women have gained power in society, so they've tried to push society towards the Dionysian. Now, the Apollonian has real difficulty with the idea of transsexualism, right? Because the Apollonian goes, you're born a boy, you're obviously going to grow up into be a man. You know? It's logical. The Dionysian is able to say, no, that's not how it works. That takes no account of what the individual feels themselves to be. That doesn't allow for the fact that maybe you were born physically a boy, but feeling yourself a girl. Now, I'm not taking the side of the, of either the essentialists or the innate gender theory type. I'm just telling you how these things work. So, using Apollonian thinking, using the Logos, when somebody says, I'm a girl but I have a penis, that just doesn't work. That's just not good. No, there's no way that that can be accepted. To the Dionysian, or Dionysian thinking, or in Dionysian thinking mode, perhaps that'd be better, that's completely okay. That's fine. Yeah, that's what that is. That's a girl penis. Now, I have my share of fights with the autogynephiles and the gender trenders, sorry, the transgenders. But here's the thing, I have a transsexual girlfriend, and she has a penis. So when I look at her, am I looking at a man, or am I looking at a woman who happens to have a penis? And the answer is the latter, right? When I look at someone, she's not a man, she's a woman. She happens to have a penis. And Dionysian thinking, no problem. That's not a problem. That's fine. You relate. You feel her as a woman. Therefore, she's a woman. She feels herself to be a woman. She's a woman. It steps away from the cut and dried world of mathematics and slide rules and micrometers and spanners and stuff, which I love, by the way. I'm always flittering about with techie stuff. And moves into this ethereal, feelings-based, informed by your subconscious thought way of doing things, informed by the way you feel about someone and the way someone feels about themselves. And I think one of the problems that we have today is that, essentially you've got the Apollonians standing on one side going, yeah, boo sucks. And on the other side you've got the Dionysians going, yeah, boo sucks. And it's like, you're going to have to find some kind of middle ground. I live in a culture where they have found that. Nobody here thinks twice about the idea of a girl with a penis. It's like, yeah, okay, she's a girl. She will have to obey certain rules in society. Or she'll be expected to form partnerships with men, because there is a rule that's never broken, and that is boys have sex with girls and girls have sex with boys. And people who step outside that, well, they might hit some pushback. But as long as the girl is a beautiful girl who is attractive to men and who enjoys having partners, male partners, no, it's fine. Everybody's going to go fine. They're not even going to think that it's really homosexual. I mean, a few extreme religious types might, but most people will go, no, she's bacala, she's a girl. In this culture, a bacala, that is a feminized male, a homosexual feminized male, is a girl. That's it. She's got a girl inside. That's it. Nobody is going to query that. So she's dating a guy that's perfectly normal. And I think that the West really, really, really needs to get a handle on this. I listen to a lot from a lot of people. And, I hear the Apollonians. The thing that Apollonians have to remember, and remember, I have a lot of sympathy for the Apollonian way of thinking, I like science. I'm a photographer. Ansel Adams said that photography is a mixture of art, science, and witchcraft. And he was talking about traditional wet photography, which is what I was trained in, which is still my passion, But he was right. Photographers unite that idea of the art and the science. We bring it together, really. That's, because you can't make, in the old days, you could not make the photograph. You could not make the art without understanding the science. Couldn't do it. It wasn't possible, So, you have to be able to open up your mind to both ways of thinking. And trying to be entirely Dionysian, touchy-feely, new age, that's fine, but the world will fall apart. Nothing will ever get done. As Camille Paglia said, if the world had been left to women, we'd be still living in huts, and that's what would happen. If you want to get progress, if you want things to change and get things done, you need to think in the Apollonian style. You need to do all this. That, by the way, is my thoroughly Dionysian girlfriend playing with the cat. Do you see what I mean? the polarization of society that we have unfortunately allowed is extremely destructive. My concern, as you know, is with HSTS, homosexual transsexuals, that is sexual inverts who would later transition. And they will appear in childhood. And at the moment I think they're under terrible threat because of this level of absolutism, which is saying, well, you're born a boy, you must be a boy. That is not how it is. Some boys are girls. It's just that simple. You know, and you have to, if that's the case, you have to go with it. Now, I'm not saying every child knows what they are by the time they're 7 or 8. That would be insane. You know, the function of a parent or of a professional is to make an intelligent, balanced judgment. But that intelligent, balanced judgment must take into account both possible ways of looking at it. It must. To be completely Apollonian, which I'm afraid I've heard far too much of recently, you know, all this, well, you know, biology. Boys must be boys because biology. Well, fuck off, you know, that's ridiculous. That's essentialist, absolutist nonsense. That's not how it is, you know. Your gender is related to your sexuality, not to your sex. And you need to accommodate the Dionysian way of thinking in order to understand that. And we need to do that. Anyway, that was your little lessons on philosophy for just now. If you like that kind of thing, I've got loads of more of that, you know, shit. I mean, art is my thing. Okay, take care. Take care of yourselves. Bye. Bye.